Fabulous. Strong start.
Welcome, Lauren. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for hosting me, my lovely.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this conversation because we'll be talking about branding, we'll be talking about story, we'll be talking about building our business. So let's do it. We are going to get into the topic that we have chosen for today, but why don't we start with who Lauren is? So tell us, Lauren, what is your story?
Well, I think to tell my whole story, and I will try and keep it short and succinct, but I'm not great at that, I'll be honest. I do love a tangent. So my story started, I think, probably when I was 15. So I had a moment. My life at that point in time was incredibly turbulent because I had two parents who suffered quite severe mental health issues. And my father, bless him, he took his own life when I was 24, and before that I'd attempted many times. So my life was incredibly turbulent. My parents weren't together, so I rarely saw my dad, and when I did, it was difficult. And my mum struggled with depression too, obviously, with all of that going on, you can imagine. So I'm 15, and I'm sat on the swings at the park, and I remember this moment so incredibly clearly. I felt completely and utterly worthless, because I believed that, you know, all of the suicide attempts, and I just felt incredibly worthless. I felt like I didn't have any value. So I'm sat there on the swings at the park, and I'm thinking to myself, but I don't want to feel like this. I don't want this. And I had this very conscious moment of clarity where I decided I wanted something else. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to not be lonely. I wanted to have a life that was filled with wonderful experiences. And I made a decision there and then when I was 15 years old that my life was going to be different. I wasn't going to be a victim of the experiences that I'd had up until that moment. And I think the thing that helps me is that the moment before that moment, I realized that my parents were not perfect. And to expect them to be perfect would be an incredibly unfair thing, because both of them they were a product of their own experiences. They had very difficult childhoods themselves. So I realized they weren't superheroes. I stopped expecting them to be perfect. And then that allowed me to, you know, forgive them, I suppose, in my own way for not being perhaps what I felt I needed them to be. So all of that helped me get to that place of decision, of deciding that actually this wasn't what my life was going to look like. So jump forward a number of years. So I'm now 38, and I have a beautiful business that I am so completely, deeply in love with. And the reason that I have come to this place is that I realized how important that pivotal moment was for me. That moment of consciousness, that moment of radical self-acceptance, acceptance of my circumstances, acceptance of the experiences that I'd had, and the decision that I made that stuff was not going to determine my path. And I now, basically what I now do is I do work exclusively with women, but this stuff applies to men just as easily. So I work with women to get them to that place of deep self-acceptance, because actually when you show up in your business, if you can show up with authenticity, if you can really step into your power and be exactly who you are without any apologies, then you are onto an absolute winner. Because firstly, it feels great. I'm going to try very hard not to swear because I do have a mouth like a sailor, but I will try not to swear. There was an F-bomb that was just dying to come out then, but it feels absolutely wonderful to be able to just show up as your authentic self. The other thing, of course, is that when you do that, you start to attract the right people to your business. You attract the people to your business that love you exactly as you are and want you exactly as you are, and they value everything that you have to offer. So there is a huge shift that happens in your business when you are able to show up as your authentic self. But the work that I do, it's not superficial work. It's not just designing a logo for somebody. We go back, we go back into who you are as a person. What is your mindset around this stuff? Having a level of self-awareness and understanding how important that stuff is in your business, because your business and yourself are not separate. Just a caveat, just before I wrap up that little answer, The caveat is that I work with individuals, so I don't work with companies. Obviously, a brand for a company is an entirely different situation. But for individuals who run their own businesses, then this stuff is just magic.
Oh, wow. You had so much wisdom when you were only 15. How amazing is that?
I don't think I acknowledged that when I was 15. But I mean, I had a lot of conversations with my mum. So my mum is an incredibly smart woman, and I love her. She's bat crazy at the best of times, and not always in a good way, but I love her dearly. She is so strong. She is just so loving and so supportive, underneath everything. And she has said certain things to me through my life that have just completely changed the way that I feel, the way that I see things, and the way that I feel things. So just as a quick example, when I was 16, I went through my first breakup with my first boyfriend, and I was obviously, the world was falling apart. And she said, and I was like, I just don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel this way. And she said to me, but you have to acknowledge that the pain is a part of you. You can't put it over there. You have to accept it as a part of you and love it as much as you love everything else about you. And I was like, whatever, mum, because I was 16, obviously. And then I think a few months later, I was like, I get what you mean now. So just little pearls of wisdom like that just came through, and just they shaped who I am, really. So I do have my mum to thank for who I am. So, yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And there's so much goodness that you shared with us. You talked about accepting circumstances exactly how they were. You talked about accepting your parents and not letting those circumstances and your parents and their situation define who you are and how you would feel and how your life is going to turn out. I think that's so inspiring. That's so beautiful. And making that decision that I'm going to accept things as they are, and yet make the choice to become a different person and live a different life. I think that's hugely inspiring. Thank you for that.
No, you're so welcome. And I think it's what comes through in all of the work that I do with my clients, because I want that for everybody. I want everybody to know that it is, if a 15-year-old girl sat on the swings by herself in the park can do that, it's possible for anyone, surely. And it's so often if I tell this story, so often people will say, oh, but you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You just, and I'm like, I don't believe that. I don't accept it. I think that it is possible. It has to be possible. There has to be another way. It's just it's a power of mind situation. It is a decision that you make. I remember having I know this group is all about telling stories, so I have a few stories, and this is quite a fun one. So I was chatting to these lovely two Mormon boys that approached me on Southampton Common one day. It was a boiling hot 25-degree July afternoon, and I was walking the dog, and they came up to me all suited and booted with their backpacks on. They must have been about 18, 19. And they said to me, so I'm just so I'm an atheist, but I am respectful, obviously, of people's beliefs. So they came up to me and they said, would you mind if we just asked you a question? We'd like to know where you think happiness comes from. And I said, well, personally, I think that happiness comes from within. I don't think it's got anything to do with external factors. I think it's a decision that you make. You choose to be happy with whatever the situation. You find joy in the situation. If you can't find joy right now, then you hold on to that feeling that it will come, and you will find it at some point, and you don't get lost in that. One of the lads started just nodding along, and the other one's nudging him, going, oh no, but we think that happiness comes from God. And and it was so funny that the chap started nodding along, because he liked the idea of it. And I think the reason he liked the idea of it is because as human beings, we need to feel in control. It's an innate human need. We get frustrated, we get anxious if we're not in control. And actually, if you acknowledge that you have control over your happiness, then that's incredibly empowering, right?
Yes, it puts us back in the driver's seat instead of depending on our outer circumstances, our parents, our family, siblings, clients, God, religion, society, community, whatever it is for us. Yeah. Instead of depending on any of those things, we can take ownership for our own life and our own happiness. That's a massive thing to be able to do, because then it then we can do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else that I talk about a lot in that same sort of area is to do with blame. So, for example, if you find yourself in your business and something's not working, you might blame the fact that you don't have enough money to invest, or you might blame the fact that you don't have the resources, or you might blame the current situation of the pandemic. The problem with that, and I understand it, I fully 100% understand why we do that as humans, because it just feels easier to blame something else. And I'm not at all saying that we need to blame ourselves at all. What I'm saying is we need to take accountability and take back control, because when you blame something, you're putting it outside of yourself and you are disempowering yourself in that situation. So it's so important for us to acknowledge that actually it's not about something that happened over there. It's about what I can do about it from here. That's what we need to shift our focus to, I think.
Yeah, the moment blame comes in, we become the victim.
Exactly.
And that's where we lose our power. And I think that's where what you're talking about is so powerful, getting that power back by not blaming, but making that choice to do something about whatever is not working for us.
Yeah, exactly. I think that people have a tendency to either blame others or blame themselves, though. And neither is healthy for us. Because when you start blaming yourself, then you start beating yourself and you're putting yourself down and down and down, and you're not lifting yourself up. There's no need for blaming ourselves. The truth is, when I think over the course of my life and the things that have happened, and there's been plenty of crazy things that have happened, I wouldn't blame that person. I wouldn't blame myself, because firstly, it's not productive. It doesn't get you anywhere at all. It's not an effective strategy. And secondly, because my ethos in life is that everybody's got reasons for being the way that they are and doing the things that they do. And firstly, you don't know the battles that people are facing. And secondly, it's unfair to put that responsibility on them for the way that they made you feel, because they were just doing whatever they were doing, and sometimes they don't even know why they did it themselves, because we're not always conscious of this stuff. Anyway, this is going completely off topic. I told you I loved a tangent.
Well, it's all useful information and it's all useful wisdom that all of us can implement and benefit from and live lives with less stress. Because if we can bring in more forgiveness, if we can stop blaming other people or circumstances for our lives will be richer and happier for it.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, so how does the work that you do fit in with the branding work, the story work and the branding work? How do they two come together?
So for me, I've got a very clear process that I take my clients through to get them from wherever they're at now to having a brand that they feel absolutely fabulous showing up for, one that they are proud of, one that makes them feel stronger and more powerful in themselves. Because the great thing about a brand is that it's something that's bigger than yourself. So you're not just relying on yourself in your business. You've got this beautiful sort of entity that is a part of you. So it's born of you. So I'm very much of the mind that when you develop a brand, it should come from you. It should always start with you. Other people that do this kind of work might say it needs to be 100% focused on the ideal client. I disagree. I think that your marketing messages need to be focused on your ideal client, but your brand should be born of you. Because otherwise, what happens later down the line is that you create this brand that is 100% focused on your ideal client. If you've got your ideal client wrong, for starters, you're going to be completely out of alignment at some point, and the whole thing's just not going to feel nice to show up for. So where I start is with who you are as a person, as an individual. What makes you you? What are your strengths? What are your limitations? And actually helping my clients with their mindset around that, and getting to that place of acceptance with the limitations and their flaws. And I'm noisy, like I'm so noisy, and I talk far too much. My other half says to me that I will always use 1,000 words when other people would just use 10. I talk too much. I'm a little bit bossy sometimes. All of those things could be perceived as flaws, but actually my ideal client loves those things about me. So it's about accepting those things about ourselves that we think are flaws, but that actually could really appeal to the people that we want to work with. So it starts there. It starts with who you are as a person, looking at your limiting beliefs, really figuring out if there's any mindset blocks, because the truth is that if you have mindset blocks from the beginning, if you believe, for example, that your business will fail, because there are plenty of people who start a business and there is we have a dissonance inside of us, all of us. We've got two voices. We've got the big grown-up voice that's like, this is fine, I've got this. And we've got the little voice, the little scared voice that's like the little child self that's just all the time saying, oh, but what if it doesn't work? What if it fails? What if people think we look stupid? All of that stuff. So there's always a dissonance going on inside of us, and we've got to be so aware of it, of that, and have that dialogue between the two. But to have a dialogue that is loving and compassionate, not, oh, for goodness sake, shut up. Like, why do you keep just down talking everything? Not that conversation. It should be kindness, curiosity, compassion, not judgment. So that's where we start. And then we look into the kind of the brand personality. So this is taking all of that really lovely stuff that we've worked through, figuring out who you are as a person, what you stand for, your values. Oh my goodness, your values are so important, and they should always come across in your brand. So your personal values and your brand values are slightly different. So this does cause a bit of confusion occasionally with some people. So you'll have your personal values. So for example, not in a million years would I ever work with somebody who I had thought had any kind of racist views. Not interested, none at all. If they want to pay me £1 million, not interested, because I have no interest in working with somebody who has racist ideals or xenophobic, anything like that, because I'm very anti-discrimination. So that is a very strong point for me. So that's a personal value. It's also a core brand value because it comes into my work. So other personal values for me might be freedom. I value freedom probably above everything else because it incorporates all of the other stuff. And freedom actually does come across in my business, but there are some that don't. Essentially what you need to do with your core brand values is to develop brand values that not only reflect your values, but also reflect your ideal client's values. So they're a little bit more tailored basically towards your customer. So working on your values and understanding how important those are in terms of creating your brand is one of the key components of the work that I do with my clients, because it's one of those great attraction points for clients. So if you can talk about your values in your content, then your people who are out there who share those values are going to read your copy and they're going to see themselves there. They're going to feel connected with you. So I always use dating as an analogy. When you go on a date with somebody, say that you desperately want a family at some point in the future, and then you're chatting with this person and they say, oh no, absolutely no interest in having children. The values are completely misaligned, so instantly you're going to feel less attracted to them as a life partner. So it works the same with your ideal client. It's no different. It's a relationship at the end of the day. So all the things that you want in a relationship, in your friends, in your partner, they're not dissimilar to the things you'd want in the relationship with your ideal client. So the values and the vision of your brand, this stuff is so important. What is it that you want? What change is it that you want to create in the world through your business, through your brand? Always ask yourself that question, because people will buy into your why, even more so than they'll buy into what it is that you sell or how you do it, because they can get on board with that, because there is a deep emotional connection with that kind of stuff. So that's the sort of brand personality work that I do. I could go on forever. Do feel free to jump in.
We are going to go deeper into each of these things, but I want to share with you that we have a live audience building up here. We have Sally here. Hi, Sally. We also have Jill here. Hi, Jill. We also have Natalie here. Hi, Natalie. And Jill has a comment, and Jill says, I always thought you are your brand.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do think that having worked with lots of people now, obviously on this stuff, there are some people who I would say are my ideal client, and those are the kind of people who are so willing to share themselves through their brand. But there are, of course, people who are more guarded. They have barriers, and they are less willing or less likely to want to share themselves through their brand. And that has to be respected. So in the work that I do, I will respect that with them. What I usually do is a little bit of mindset work about releasing some of those barriers just to help them feel more comfortable with it. But you can tell when people are just not able to share too much of themselves through their brand. So I think that sharing yourself through your brand is one of the most powerful things you can do, because the way that I describe a brand, so when people say to me, what is a brand? It's a logo, right? And I'm like, no, it's not. It's like so much more than just a logo. The logo is like step 6 of my program. Like we don't even get to that until then. So the way I describe it is that the business is like the physical body. Okay, so it's the blood and bones and the working parts and all of that stuff. And the brand then is the personality. So the brand is the part that people start to feel an affinity with, or they develop a connection with it. And the magic of having a brand is that when people start to really fall in love with your brand, they will feel invested in you as a person and as a business. And that's really when you start to get evangelists, people that love your brand so much that they must recommend you to all of their friends. And that's really the power of having a brand, especially one that is true to you. But also, like I said about authenticity before, it means that you can really just show up as yourself. I had the most amazing workshop with one of my clients last year, and she's sort of just starting out in business, but she's been going for maybe about a year. And we did an ideal client workshop. And we went through the whole process. And I said to her, basically, your ideal client is kind of a reflection of yourself. And she's like, wait a minute. Are you basically just saying that I can just be myself? And I was like, yeah. She went, oh, thank goodness. Because we think that we have to show up as something. Like there's the should word. I hate the word should. I feel like it should be banned from the English language.
With a mask, with a facade.
Yes, exactly. We feel like we should be a certain way. And I know this because I was the same. I mean, I started my wedding photography business, which is where I started out in 2012. And I thought that I was supposed to write in a really formal, professional. I'm not formal or professional, as you can probably tell. I'm the least formal person you'll ever meet. I mean, you can be professional without being formal, and that's the sweet spot, really, isn't it? So yeah, and I felt like I had to be something that I wasn't, and I wasn't attracting my ideal client at all. And of course I wasn't, because I was putting out content that was like a wall between my personality and them. So they couldn't see me. They couldn't see me in my content at all. But as soon as I changed that, I started getting my ideal client through the door in droves, and they didn't quibble on price because they valued what I do. They were personalities that I just gelled so beautifully with. They had the same sort of common interest. Like I'm obsessed with travel. So I was getting lots of people through the door that have been to like crazy far-flung places, and we had so much to talk about, so only when you really show up as your authentic self are you going to get the right people through the door. Because, the other side of it is that when you show up as a version of yourself, people can feel that. They feel like you're hiding something, because you're hiding your real self. And if they get that feeling, they won't know that you're hiding your real self. They'll just think that something's off, and they'll walk away because they don't trust that. And that's why authenticity, and I know it's such a buzzword, but it is so important.
Yes, I think that's where everything starts. And what you just shared about not putting content out, which was aligned with who you really were. Yeah. I've done that mistake as well. When I started my business and I started working with this big coach, I wanted to rely on them for their formulae, for templates that would work, for things that would work, because there was this belief that I've never been an entrepreneur before, because I came from safe corporate jobs. And so I was putting content out, which was all good content, but people could feel that there was something off. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't really say what it was. Yeah. But it showed up in terms of no sales.
Exactly. And I think it's really common.
Yeah, it's very common. And the day I ditched all those templates, all those formulae, all those things that I had invested a lot of money in, and started talking exactly how I was and what I wanted to do, that's the day my business turned around. And actually, that's the day I started having a business. Let's put it that way, because until then, I had no business. I just had something I was trying to make work, but it wasn't working.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I just think because it's so common, and the reason it's common is because, like you said, you started out, there's imposter syndrome, there's mindset blocks, there's a lot of I don't know what to do. Like you don't know what you don't know when you first start a business either, you know. So you see other things that work for other people and you try those things. And I think that's just normal. It's just a part of the learning experience. So it's not something to ever beat yourself up about. You know, I wouldn't beat myself up about the fact that I got it wrong in the beginning. I just accept that I got it wrong and learn from it and move on. And that's another thing that I spend a lot of time talking about, actually, is I love the expression fail forward. I don't know if you've heard it before. It's a great expression. And it just encompasses the way that I live my life in general, but especially the way that I run my business, because I screw up all the time, but it's fine. Like, you just learn from that experience, and then you move forward with it, with everything that you've learned. You know, you don't beat yourself about getting it wrong. Don't worry about what other people think. The truth is, and this is the funniest thing, we all worry about what everybody else is thinking. Nobody else is thinking about us. They're not. Everybody's so preoccupied with their own lives. They don't care what we're doing. And actually, the other great thing about screwing things up is that it just shows you're human. Like, I go live quite frequently in my group and I screw up all the time. The tech fails and I just laugh it off. And, you know, it's because the real testament to who you are as a person is how you deal with those things. You know, if you go red from the chin up and then just turn off the live, then people are going to see that you're rattled by it. And that's the impression they're going to have of you. Or you could just suck it up and just keep going and laugh it off. And then that's the impression they get of you. And that shows such confidence. And it's because it's vulnerability. Vulnerability and confidence, I think, are the same thing. Exactly the same thing.
I think what you just dropped in there was so big and so powerful. Vulnerability and confidence are one and the same thing. Say more. It's so good.
I think the reason I came to that feeling, that thought process, it was, gosh, years ago, I think now, is because we're all vulnerable. We're, all of us, all the time. We could let that consume us, you know, because we have anxieties about what people think about us and how it's going to look and all of that stuff. And that is vulnerability. But embracing that vulnerability, that's what shows real confidence. Because the crazy thing is that we're all the same, you know, we all worry about the same things. But actually, when you're the person that can step up and do it anyway, not only does that sort of elevate people's impression of you, but it also inspires others. And that's the magic of it, is that if you can step into your power and just show up and screw up and still show up, then that really inspires other people to do the same. So at the moment, I'm just finishing up a sort of mini course that I've been doing it's called Get Camera Confident and Deliver Your Brand Genius. And it's basically about helping women to go live in their business. And so many of them have had this massive transformation on just a 3-week course. And it's because I talk about, you know, partly because I talk about all the times I've screwed up, and they've seen me screw up because they've been watching those videos. And I say to them, when I screw up, do you think that I know less? Do you think that I have less credibility? Do you think that you would be less likely to work with me? And they're all like, well, no, of course not. We're here, aren't we? You know, and it's that human element, because perfection is not relatable. If we aim for perfection, firstly, it doesn't exist at all. It's an invisible ceiling. So it's not relatable, because people, they put you on a pedestal when you're perfect. And when you're on a pedestal, you're up there away from them, and you can't resonate with that. But if you are human, to err is human. If you make mistakes, it just shows you human, and that's infinitely more relatable. So yeah.
That's beautiful. I would say this is the second time that the message about vulnerability and how it is part of being strong has come to me within probably 6-7 hours, because in this group, we started a discussion in the morning on one of the posts and threads, wherein I said, I see vulnerability as part of being strong. And Jill, who's here watching this live, she said she believes vulnerability and she believes that being strong is completely owning who we are. And I said, yeah, I love that. I love that. And you are talking about something similar, because it is so true. It is so powerful. When we own our vulnerability, we can step into who we are. We can own who we are. In my words, I call it owning our story, owning our magic. But it's all one and the same thing. And that's when we can stop pretending being someone else and we can start being ourselves.
I love that. Just that little phrase you said about owning our story, because that is it. It is about, it's not just about who I am right now. It's about the fact that I had an incredibly difficult childhood. It's about the fact that I lost my dad when I was 24 to suicide. It's about the fact that both my mum and my brother struggle with mental health, but somehow I'm like, I would say the black sheep of the family, but the rainbow colored sheep of the family, because I'm like happy, bouncy, crazy person in the corner that loves life, you know, so I'm very different to my family, but I've been through a lot. And the reason that I am this way is because I've processed it. I didn't put it away. I've allowed myself to understand why those people are the way that they are, and to then realize that that isn't a reflection on me. It's not about me. And this is the thing. So human beings, we are so self-absorbed. Like, it is all about us, right? So that's what we need to stop. Like, if we're really going to get over the stuff that's happened to us in our lives, stop making it about us. You know, it was about them and the stuff that they were going through. And that's really what's allowed me to release myself from that. But all of that stuff has made me who I am. And in a way, apart from obviously losing my dad, in a way, I wouldn't change any of it. As painful and heart-wrenching as some of it has been, I wouldn't change any of it, because I am who I am because of everything that's happened to me. So yeah, I think that, yeah, owning your story and just accepting that everything that has happened to you is a part of who you are as a person, and you have the choice. That's the key. You have the choice to make a decision about where you go from here. Even as, like, you know, a 55-year-old woman, you could, at that moment in time, you could decide that you want to do something differently. You want to be something else. And it really is just about fully accepting who you are as a person and being kind to yourself and being kind to others as well, showing compassion to others. This is absolutely not what I'm supposed to be talking about. I'm so sorry. I love this stuff. It's powerful stuff, isn't it?
I think this stuff is really useful and it is important. When I help people with their story, what a lot of people think story work is all about crafting that story, that jazzy story that they can use on the stage or on the video, and that is part of it. But underneath, the rest of the story work is exactly the kind of things that you're talking about. And that is why working on our stories is so powerful. And you deal with stories in a slightly different way.
Yeah, but I don't know that it is that different a way, to be honest. So for me, for example, I've got my Facebook group, and everybody in there knows my story because it's a part of who I am. It's a part of why I do what I do, because I have, so one of my core brand values is to help others, because I love this concept of a ripple effect. So I help one client, but my ideal client is somebody who also is, you know, like a therapist or a coach, or somebody that provides that kind of intimate service. Oh, that sounds a bit rude. That's not what I meant.
See, you're so self-absorbed in the moment. I didn't think you were being rude.
It runs away with itself sometimes. But yeah, so it's that idea of helping others to help others. And that comes from that place of being that 15-year-old and so desperately wanting to be able to help my parents, but knowing that I didn't have the power in that time to be able to help them. But I do have the power to be able to help my clients. So I can use all of that good stuff, all of that like personal life experience and that insight that I've gained, and actually help people and then help them to help others. And I just think it's just such a lovely legacy, isn't it, to be able to create that or be a part of that ripple effect. I completely forgot what the question was. Oh, we were talking about how I use story in the work with my clients. So what I encourage them to do, through telling my story is to tell their story. So I love the expression, have the breakdown off camera and the breakthrough on camera. So I don't think it's appropriate or inspiring or helpful to you as an individual to go on to your business page and have a rant about things, for example. But you can have, obviously, those feelings are all valid, 100%. And you share them with your closest. And then whatever you learn from that situation, that's what you then go and share with your audience.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I would call it work on your story first, heal from it, and then go and share it.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And it's because, people can get the wrong impression, I think, because in those moments when you're in that like rant phase, you're not 100% yourself. You're like a heightened emotional version of yourself. So you're not showing up as yourself really in that moment. I mean, you kind of are. You're sort of fully 100% your authentic self in that moment, but it's not representative of who you are as a person. So I help my clients basically to understand what their story is, what they've learned from it, to then share that wisdom with their clients. So that's kind of how story comes into it for me. But also because when you talk about your story, when you talk about your life experiences and the things you've learned from them, then other people read those words and they see themselves in your story. And the wonderful thing about story in terms of branding and marketing is that it's not salesy at all. Not at all. People have carte blanche to take whatever they want from it. They decide how they feel at the end of the story, how they feel about the characters in the story, whether they relate to them. They have 100% control. And as I said, we like to feel in control. So, but what you can do when you tell your story is that you can connect with those people. And then when you've got that connection, it becomes, the selling process becomes more straightforward because they trust you, because they're like you. They've had similar experiences or they were inspired by the way that you've come through an experience. So story is incredibly important in terms of branding, really.
Yeah, especially for businesses like ours, the coaching kind of business, wherein we are our brand, essentially. Exactly. So my brand, what my work stands for is a true representation of what I stand for, because that's the easiest way for me to build my business, have fun in the process, and get clients because they know exactly who they are getting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked about ideal clients a little bit, but I'm going to get into a bit more depth with it now because it's so important, is really knowing your ideal client. Now, before I really did the work, I did lots of like little free workshops or free downloads where you could get your ideal client profile together, and they just never go into enough depth. And it's the depth is where the real power is. So, doing the demographics, so understanding their gender, their age, and where they live, and that kind of thing it gives you a bit of background, so you can sort of start to visualize what their daily life might look like. So, for example, the life of a 22-year-old female is a completely different story to a 65-year-old man. So you'd speak to them differently. You'd use different language. You'd use different mediums. So, you possibly wouldn't use memes for a 65-year-old as much as you would for a 22-year-old. So the way that you show up is different. The language that you use, the pop culture references are going to be completely different. So the demos are great for that kind of stuff, but it's a bit superficial. The real power with your ideal client is understanding what makes them tick. Like, what keeps them awake at night? What do they really worry about? What are they frustrated about? What are the actual problems that they have that you can solve for them, and how do you solve them? And this one's really key, actually, that people often leave out, is the objections. So when I say objections, I mean like the barriers to sale, essentially. So just as a easygoing example, imagine you're on a website, you've picked out some clothes and they're in the basket, and you go to checkout, and then you think to yourself, oh, what if I don't like them? And then immediately under buy now or pay now, it says 14-day money back guarantee. Instantly, the objection is dissolved. So you know that you've got an out, basically. So the risk is removed. So understanding the objections and the reasons why they might not buy would, for example, I don't have enough time. Like, I want to do a course, but I don't have enough time. So where they'd actually buy now, you'd have something that said something like, this is only going to take like an hour of your time, but it's going to give you this amazing value or benefit. So it's about removing those barriers, but you can only really get into that stuff when you know the individual that you're dealing with. So with the ideal client work, it's not about a group of people. This is the big mistake that people make. So I'll often say to my clients when I first start working with them, if you've got any idea who your ideal client might be, and they'll say, oh yeah, probably female, age 35 to 65. And I'm like, nope. One person. Your ideal client, the concept of your ideal client is that it is your ideal client, the one person that you want to work with over and over again, the one person that, you know, lights your heart on fire because the work you do for them gets them so much progress. It makes them feel amazing. It makes you feel amazing. It's fulfilling working with them. Somebody who buys from you over and over again and recommends you to all of their friends. Yeah. Somebody who leaves you the most incredible testimonial. You know, that's the kind of person that you want to work with. Somebody you've got things in common with, so you have a connection with them and lots of things to talk about. It's your ideal client. And you've got to get really specific with it. And that scares the crap out of most people because they think that getting really, really specific and targeted means that they're going to alienate a bunch of people that they could have sold to. It doesn't work like that. You just alienate the people you didn't want to work with anyway.
Yeah, and they wouldn't want to work with us anyway. And that's okay because we can't work with all the 7 billion people in this world.
Absolutely. And I think that with the ideal client stuff, the reason I like it so much is because what happens when you go through the process of identifying your ideal client, it happened to me when I first did it. So I was 5 years into my business before I had an ideal client profile, a logo, let alone a concept of a brand. So this is 7 years ago now. And what happened to me and what happens to all of my clients is that when they go through their profile, they go, wait a second, this is basically me. Right? So you're actually like profiling yourself essentially. And often I think, especially with women in business, we choose a job, we create a business based around something we needed at a certain point in our past. And it's because we've been through the pain of not having that thing available and not being just right for us. So when you acknowledge that, it makes it much easier to identify your ideal client because you were there once. So if you can get your headspace back into how you felt in that situation, then it's going to be much easier to show your ideal client now that you understand that because you were there. And that's a part of your story too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've tried doing the demographics work as far as the ideal client is concerned. But in my case, I realized that it doesn't help much because it's not deep enough, exactly how you said. And what I would say is my most pleasurable experiences of coaching people have been coaching people who were where I was a few years ago.
Exactly.
So, for example, speed is something that's really important for me. I like things done quickly. So there are people who can get offended with that speed. They don't like to be rushed. But my kind of people, they appreciate that speed.
Yeah, exactly. And some people, might see that in themselves as a flaw, like you're rushing people, but actually you've accepted that that is a good thing because that's what your ideal clients need and want. And it is, and again, it comes back to that deep self-acceptance of, who you are as a person and not trying to be something else. Because we fall out of alignment with ourselves, we fall out of love with our business if we try to show up as something other than ourselves. So that's why that work starts in the very beginning with me, is that we do that real deep self-acceptance stuff at the very beginning. And we carry on, obviously, it's not just one session and you're done with that. It's a process. But yeah, with the ideal client, I think that it's so much more important than people realize. And the demographics are important. They're just not as good for creating marketing messages or copywriting and that kind of thing as the psychographics. But with the demographics, where they do work, for example, say your ideal client is a mum of young children, but she's just starting a new business, right? Think about that lady's life, what it looks like. Busy, right? It's going to be pretty full. It's going to be a bit stressful. There's a lot going on. She's got 2 small children at home. She's not going to have a massive amount of time. So she's not going to be able to, for example, sit around and read a long article or a blog post, but she might have time to listen to a podcast while she's ironing, or doing something else at home, or, you know, doing something for a business. You might be listening to a podcast. So what the demographics help you to do is tailor the kind of content that you create and where you put it, for example. So which platform, Facebook, Instagram, you know, YouTube, whatever, but also when you release it as well. So the demographics are really good for tailoring that part of your sort of social media strategy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, but it's not enough to do that work. Like you said, we have to go much deeper. We have to understand what keeps them awake at night. That's really important. Essentially, what problem do they have? What objection do they have in working with you or in working with a coach? And what are some of their key values? Because unless and until there's an alignment in our values, it's just not going to be a delightful relationship.
Yeah, and the other thing, the great thing about values as well, aside from the fact that they're just wonderful for creating a point of connection, is that they can actually really, really help you with content creation. So something else that I hear all the time is just, I don't know what to write. I don't know what content to create. There's so much that you can talk about. We limit ourselves so badly. We think we can just talk about what we do. No. This is the other thing about when you identify that your ideal client is very similar to you, you realize that if you like that thing, they probably like that thing too. So talk about it. You know, it doesn't have to be all business. The real magic is when you can take something that's like a personal life experience and you can turn it into something that's valuable in terms of how they can use it in their business, or, you know, if it's B2C, how they can use it in their daily lives or whatever. So you can create value there. But I do a great workshop actually that's based on creating content from your values. So you literally just brainstorm your values. So if I took confidence, for example, I don't have it here actually. I've got it. Do I have it? No, I don't. Damn it. Should have had it to hand. So I did a brainstorm of the word confidence. So just anything that came up, and you've got to allow yourself some freedom with this, and not, they always say to write in colored pens and pencils, not black pen, because that's too rational. You want to be a bit creative with it. So do a brainstorm, colored pens and pencils, just the one word in the middle of your value, and just see what comes up, like see where it takes you. And then what you do after that is to refine it into content titles. So for example, I could do confidence is attractive. Why use it in your brand? How do you get confidence? Where does it come from? 3 top tips for developing your confidence, or how to be more confident on camera. You know, so all of a sudden you've got all of these ideas that have just come from that one value. So it's a really, really great exercise that I would recommend anybody do, to be honest, because you just never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah. Now, I think this exercise is pure gold, because when you said confidence, I straight away thought of fear, because it's on the opposite end of spectrum. And then I can talk about fear and what to do about it, and how people can, or share a personal story about fear. Don't always have to come out the other side. I thought of freedom, because if we are confident, we can be free.
Yeah.
So there are just so many things that we can do. I think it's a brilliant example. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brilliant exercise.
It's a fun exercise as well, because especially if you do it in colored pens and pencils, you can just pretend like you're 5 again. Which is nice. But yeah, I would recommend that anybody do that, because like, depending on whatever your values are, you can do it, because your brain will take you in places. You know, your thought process was different to mine, for example, you know, although I think I did have like procrastination and confidence, and how those two things are intertwined, and how confidence can help with overwhelm and things like that. So, but once you've got the headline, then you can pad it out, obviously, with the information. But it's getting the headline, I think, like getting the subject is the hardest thing for some people. And it's because we do have all of this stuff flying around in our heads. We've got all the information is there. It's just about grabbing it. But I think there is so much power in actually grabbing a pen and paper and writing stuff down, because it's overwhelming to try and manage our thought processes when they're just flying around our brains, you know. So really just get that stuff out of your subconscious and into your conscious and write it down, and then you can actually use it.
Yeah, absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So is there a way people can experience some more of this goodness?
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously lots of ways that people can contact me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I've got a wonderful Facebook group, which is the Brand Visibility Network for Women in Business. And actually in there next week, I've got a fabulous free coaching week. So we're doing a 15-minute workshop each day. And essentially it's to get you from feeling stalled in your business to, feeling more successful in your business. So we've got, the first one is powerful goal setting, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. The second workshop is building an intentional brand, and that's with a guest expert, Lucille Devine. She's fabulous. She literally lives her passion through her work. I love her. And then the third one is about the ideal client, so getting up close and personal with your ideal client. The fourth workshop, then we're looking at mastering your message, so copywriting. That's with Laura McDougall. And then we've got building building a purposeful online presence. So it's websites and social media. So they're just 15-minute workshops with myself or a guest expert, and basically they're designed to just get you from feeling a bit stuck in your business to get you going again. It's a step-by-step plan, basically, which I think is what we need sometimes, right?
Yeah. And I can see how through this workshop, the way you have designed it, you have handled one of the biggest objections people have, and that is time.
It is the biggest objection people have, hands down. It is, 100%. When I ask people, what is it that's holding you back in your business? Why are you not achieving your goals? Always, I don't have enough time. But actually the truth is that if you put in the work, then, so for example, this workshop is designed because I know that we waste so much time in our businesses, so much time showing up on platforms that don't work for us, putting out content that isn't speaking to your ideal client. It is just wasting your time. So by doing this process, this 5-step process, and actually we've got a bonus session on the following Monday as well, which is basically putting together a plan. So doing this 5-step process is going to save you time in the long run. That's exactly how I've designed it, because time is just the biggest resource that we have so little of.
And we cannot get more of it.
Nope. It is what it is.
It is what it is. And everybody has exactly the same amount of time. And I think that's why time is such a big leveler.
And I think the interesting thing about time, though, and doing something like this, for example, is whether you value it enough. And that's where messaging is so important. And that's why it's key to make sure that you get the message across of what people are going to get from it. Because if you don't do that, people won't value it enough to put their time in. So something else that I've realized over the years is that every single interaction you have with people online and with your business is essentially a sales transaction. You have to give them something in return for their time, because people...
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that.
It's just, I think that we expect people to just be interested. But like I said, we're self-absorbed creatures. Human beings just naturally are. It's just the way we're wired, We're quite self-serving. I mean, we're wonderful. I love humans. I love people, but we are quite self-serving creatures. So it is about us. It's about what can I get? And you have to bear that in mind, but not be resentful of it, because that's just how we're hardwired. There's no point in being resentful. So if you want to be successful in your business, you have to acknowledge that every interaction that you invite your audience members into with you, you've got to give them something in return for giving you their time.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we finish this conversation, will you be kind enough to leave all the links that where we can connect with you, and also the link to this workshop that's coming up next week?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no problem at all. I will do that.
Before we let you go, what is one big message that you want to share with our audience, Lauren?
I think I've already covered it. It's the one thing that I think is the underpinning thing for me, and it is, don't be afraid of failure. I really enjoy failure. I enjoy screwing up, because I know that every single time I fail gets me closer to where I want to be. And that's how we have to see it. We have to stop seeing it as, a poor reflection on ourselves, because we don't come out of the womb just knowing everything that we're supposed to know. We've got to learn this stuff. We have to give ourselves the opportunity to learn this stuff. And the problem is, when you're afraid of failure, you end up failing because you don't try. You hold yourself back, you have those barriers. So that's my big underpinning message for, for success in general, is just embrace failure and be okay with it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So failure is not final. It's just a stepping stone to success.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a learning experience. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's not death.
It's not death.
It's death. We catastrophize it, don't we?
Yeah.
We think it's going to be just the worst thing ever, but it then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. What if I fail? If you start something with that thought process, you will fail, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because what happens is, if you start by thinking, what if I fail? What if this doesn't work? You go in with that energy. You go into it with that energy, and you basically, you seal your own fate, you know? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And the moment we start seeing failure as something which is not final and just a stepping stone to success, it just changes everything for us.
Absolutely. It makes life a lot easier.
Yes, and more fun.
Really more fun. I just laugh at myself when I screw up now, you know? It is what it is.
It is what it is. Lauren, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom with us. It was such a delightful conversation.
Oh, you're so welcome, lovely. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope it's been helpful to some people.
It is. It is going to help lots of people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, lovely.